This is Audiovisual Cultures, the podcast that explores different areas of the arts and cultural production with me, Paula Blair. Visit patreon.com/AV Cultures to find out more and to join the pod. Right, hello and welcome to Audiovisual Cultures. Today I have the great pleasure of speaking with Dr. Troy Hall, who is an award-winning culture strategist, radio show host, speaker, author, and talent retention strategist. Dr. Hall is the author of Cohesion Culture, Proven Principles to Retain Your Top Talent, and a new book called Fanny Rules. So we'll hopefully try and get to talk about both of those at some point. So I'd really just love to start by saying a very warm welcome, Dr. Troy Hall. Hello.
Well, hello, a very warm welcome to you too. And wow, what a beautiful face you cast on the screen, and what a shame that your listeners can't see it.
Thank you. That's very kind. I wasn't expecting that. I'm trying to take compliments. I'm trying to just take them and not bat them off these days.
Well, no, it's really a good thing to do, because, when someone gives you a compliment and you don't know what to say, the correct answer is thank you.
Yes. Exactly.
And then you get to move on. As opposed, it's like when someone says, "Oh, isn't that a wonderful outfit you have on?" And you go, "Oh, this old thing," and it's kind of, it really doesn't support, or it doesn't extend, the great greeting that the individual gave you. So I didn't mean to make you blush. So yes, listeners, she had a beautiful shade of rose happening on those cheeks when I made that sort of comment to her. But nonetheless, it was a great comment to make. I mean, people are missing it. So,
No.
But anyway, I appreciate you having me on the show today. It's a great privilege and honor on my part.
Oh, thank you. So whereabouts do we find you? Are you based in South Carolina? Is that where you are at the moment?
Well, yes, I actually live in the States here in South Carolina. I live in a city called Charleston, which many folks will know because it's one of the top 10 tourist destinations in the world, and it's the #1 tourist destination in the US. And it's a great place to live, but my work extends beyond the four walls or beyond the beaches of South Carolina, and I actually do work with companies from around the world.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Yeah, so we'll talk quite a bit about your work then. So for listeners, it might be a bit of a change of tack for us because this is an arts and culture podcast. And if people have been with me for a while, you're a regular listener, you should know that I take quite a borderless approach. I like to think of it to what we consider to be arts and culture. And I was so delighted to hear from Troy because I'm really keen to hear more and learn more about this idea of cohesion culture in the workplace. It's come up before. If you remember, we had a guest called Rachel Brook on not so long ago. And, she was talking about workplace abuse. And this is somebody who worked for quite a well-known arts and culture organisation here in the UK. And so that's something that maybe we can get into in a little bit. But I was wondering, Troy, if you wouldn't mind maybe outlining that idea of cohesion culture and your book about that topic.
Well, thank you so much for asking. So we'll start with the premise of cohesion culture and what it is. So a cohesion culture is a safe work environment where people have a sense of belonging, are valued, and share in mutual commitments. And this strategic framework can fit for all organizations. The good thing about these elements and this understanding of culture is that it's not restricted to just the US. It actually works in collective cultures. It works in individualistic cultures. It works with, individual people around the world. I mean, if you think about it, who doesn't want to belong to something? As human beings, we are actually created with a desire to want to be a part of something. And so oftentimes we will join clubs and organizations and do special events and volunteer. And we do all of that because we want to belong. We have families to extend those personal relationships. And our value comes when we find purpose and meaning in what we do. Yes, not everybody is afforded the opportunity just to work for the sake of working, right? Many of us work for the sake of making a penny, making a pound to help us get to where, we want to be in life. And so if you're not working in a place that you truly love, or a place where you feel inspired, and a place where what you're doing makes a difference, then it does make it very tedious and very tiring. And then the last is the shared mutual commitments. And although teams and groups will work together to achieve a common goal, it's really important that organizations take the stand to first commit and really do something for the development of their staff first in the mutual commitment, and then expect the employee to respond afterwards. So as you talked a little bit about a toxic work environment, the cohesion culture is just the opposite of that, and it gives really individuals an opportunity to say, we can take what we already have and we can make it better. And we do that by looking at that strategic framework of belonging, value, and mutual commitment, and say, how can I make that work in my organization and make it unique for me?
It feels like a bit of a utopian dream in a way, but I think you've shown that it's possible. This can be achieved. So, um, is there anything you could tell us about that? Where have these techniques been applied, and
Sure.
what kinds of things happen to achieve a cohesion culture in a workplace?
So the one really good thing about the cohesion culture, and again, I've been speaking about this for years, is that those three elements also help you create diversity, equity, and inclusion, which of course is a very hot topic today, to be able to think about it. So when you first consider belonging, the opportunity here is to ensure that individuals aren't just faking it until they make it. So when you find that an individual has a sense of belonging to the organization, that individual then is enthusiastic, they're going the extra mile, they're loyal, they're helping other people, they're contributing. Therefore, they're really an active part. They're vested and invested into the organization. Some of this you can actually tell from some observations that you may have of individuals to determine that. But for the large part, what I do with organizations is I start with a cultural assessment tool. And my PhD is in global leadership and entrepreneurship. And my dissertation was around group dynamics with an emphasis on cohesion. And so this model gives an opportunity to have a company benchmark. And they can look at it and say, wow, this is where we are. And then they can take a look at where they see some deficiencies, and actually then create some programs. Probably the biggest things to keep in mind is this, that today's workforce characteristics, there's four primary ones that I think your listeners might be interested in. One of them is the entrepreneurial spirit. So when it comes down to it, individuals who are working in an organization today have developed or evolved a mindset, in addition to those who are coming in, to say, I want some autonomy in what I'm doing. I want to know that I have a certain level of authority to do the job. And what is that level of authority you want? Oftentimes in an organization, people want their employees to show great initiative, but yet they haven't given them permission to show that initiative. So I like to think of initiative in this way. So part of this belonging and part of getting people in going and what they're doing is look at, and I compare it to a couch. So I think you'll kind of, or a sofa. So I might, since I'm speaking to my British colleagues, I'll use sofa, a little more sophisticated than the US word couch. So in the sofa, so you have an individual laying on the sofa. That's your first level of initiative, and they're just not doing anything. They're just laying on the sofa. The next level of initiative is they sit up on the sofa because you've called their name. So therefore, they're now listening to figure out what's next. Then the next opportunity is they stand up in front of the sofa because they have an idea, but they need to check and make sure that they can do it. The highest level of initiative, and that's really where you'll start to see individuals really blossom in this entrepreneurial spirit, is when they get up from the sofa and jump over it, and they actually go do something, and then they tell you what they're doing. So that is what we're looking at in this entrepreneurial spirit. And then we have a level of collaboration, and this is where people want their voice to be heard.
Mhm.
I can imagine, like you have great collaboration. You want your voice to be heard. You've chosen a podcast to share your voice, and to be collaborative, you've allowed guests to come on to interact with you. Just like your listeners will have an opportunity to think of how they will contribute, and even if it's just in the general arts and culture community, even going through museums or seeing art pieces, or going through lovely gardens. You still have a collaboration where you'll want to talk about the art and what it means to you and how, well, it's the same thing in a work environment. People just talk about projects then instead of art, but it's the same thing. They want to contribute and have their voice be heard. Then they want social interaction. People want to be socially connected. So podcast gives you an opportunity to be socially connected to you. They listen to you on a regular basis. They love the sound of your voice. They want to hear what you have to say. They hopefully will be interested in guests like myself who come on and hear something maybe a little different, and they'll think, wow, this is really a great thing. I'm connected. I'm connected to another part of the world that I wasn't connected to before. And then lastly is purpose and meaning. And it goes back to that value statement that I gave you before. People will seek higher purpose in their life. Sometimes they will seek it from a higher being, they'll seek it from the universe, they'll seek it from their own self-gratification, but they do seek to make sure that what they do makes sense in the world. And so all of those particular items, those characteristics of the workforce are really important when you think about them, because they transcend all generations and they transcend all cultures.
Reading around the book quite a lot, it seems to have a lot of emphasis on leadership and what employers can do to facilitate this environment. I find it really interesting because in my experience, it has been employers and management level colleagues who maybe are at the root of the toxicity. And it's how do we get certain people to recognize that maybe
Yes,
they might be at the root of the issue. If there's a place where there's a high turnover of workers because people become
yes,
unhappy and they leave, and the common denominator is maybe the line manager, for example, or a team leader or something like that. And it's how do you, when those people do not think or realize or understand that they might be the problem, is there something in your work that helps people recognize that and evaluate that and change those behaviors?
one of the ways, of course, is the cultural assessment tool, because it will give them information. The reality is, though, when you think about it, if the individual leader does not want to listen, then the individual leader doesn't listen. And so there's probably not many techniques. I mean, otherwise you'd be forcing yourself. So there's something called organizational or institutional power, and then there's the influential power. So when you exercise this organizational or institutional power, you're kind of forcing people to do something whether they want to do it or not. And guess what happens when you force people to do something whether they want to do it or not, and you go away? They go back to doing what they were doing before. So it's really hard. So it's influential power to get people to be more aware, and hopefully you can encourage the mind of the leader to be teachable. When the individual is teachable, they then build these 7 other attributes together. So I have 7 attributes of an effective leader. So when working with someone is trying to help them really expose some of these deep rooted cultural values or core values that the individuals have. So the technique is to ask questions to understand why an individual thinks the way they do. So and you want to have really safe conversations when you're trying to change the mindset of someone. If you are attempting to change their mind by telling them all the things they're doing wrong, they're not going to listen. So the opportunity is to create this experience of self-discovery. That's one way to do it. So the individual, you try to hope that they'll be teachable. So you will ask open-ended, non-leading questions to them and ask them, tell me a little bit about how you see the work environment. How do you see individuals interacting with each other? Ask about those open questions and get them to talk. Another way to do it is, and again, when I'm working with a CEO and I'm not really sure, or I'm working with an executive team and I'm not 100% sure where they are, I give them an assignment to do for 2 to 3 weeks, depending upon how long that they have the fortitude or the rigor to do it. But I ask them to do 3 things. One, I want them to check out the greetings in their organization. How are people interacting with each other? Do they actually greet each other in the hallways? Do they greet each other in the morning, on the phone, on the Zoom call, wherever they happen to be? What's that communication like when they first, do they just come in and go right to their workstation? Do they actually have some interactions with people? What is the greeting? And then again, because I'm very careful, remember, depending upon which culture I'm in, I'm saying, will you apply that to what you believe is the standard for your culture? What's the standard of the way the greeting would be? Not to go off too much, but just to say, in some Asian cultures, the greeting will be different than it will be in the American culture. So the greeting and the conversations and stuff will be different. So you have to apply. In Africa, there's a different way in which those greetings may interact. There's some similarities, but so what I'm saying is you apply what is called cultural relativity to all of this. And that means you understand the context of the culture, then you apply it. So then you look for these greetings, right? Then the next thing you listen for laughter.
Mm.
Do you hear the sound of people having fun? And if so, what are they having fun about?
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not having fun, what are they dealing with? What is going on? What is happening? And then the last element is you look for, and prior to all of this, issue with the pandemic, I used to call it a handshake. So it was greeting, laughter, and handshake. Now the handshake is kind of molded a little bit because what I'm looking for is agreement. So what you're now trying to determine is what is the way people create agreements. Sometimes they do handshakes, and that even comes in a greeting, right? A person sees each other. Sometimes they will handshake, they will hug, they will have some sort of interaction that sort of creates agreement. What does that look like? Maybe someone compliments another person, pat on the back. There's again another agreement of what the individual is doing. So I send them off to go look for that for 2 to 3 weeks. If the individual comes back and they haven't discovered anything, the likelihood is their desire to change isn't there. And if their desire to change is not there, then it's an uphill battle.
Mm.
And that really then creates a problem for the people in the organization because then they have one of two choices. Well, they have three choices to make. One, do nothing. Two, try to create conversation to make a change. Or three, find another place to go.
Mm.
And I don't recommend that since I'm a talent retention strategist. I try to create strategies to help you keep the people, not to run them away.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about some of my own past experiences and those of people who've been on the podcast as well. And it's trying to negotiate between so much of that stuff. I don't know if there's any clear-cut answer, but as you say, it's about wanting to change and wanting to address any issues. So it's trying to maybe get people to that point in the first place.
And it helps with open questions because here's what happens. Our core values of who we are as people, like I believe honesty or being truthful, I want to be fair, I don't want to do things that cause harm to people. Those are some of my basic values. Well, my belief system is built from my values, and just the same as yours and all your listeners. You have these values that you learn through life. It's called the implication theory, or the attribution theory. And so these values are created through your life experiences. And then once you have those values, your belief system starts to then be engaged based on those values. Well, then your attitude of how you react to all of those things that are happening in your world are all occurring as a result of your core values and your beliefs. So you've got core values, beliefs, and attitudes, and all three of them equate to your behaviors. And so then the behaviors that you take are a result of it. So when you see individuals who are really not behaving in a way that you think would be the something that would be appropriate or healthy or good, so like in the toxic, because however you've defined toxic, that you believe that there are some behaviors that aren't appropriate, then the best way to get to it is to understand their values and what is the core value of the individual, because you can't change the attitude, you can't change the belief if you haven't addressed the value. So that is the place to go. So your questions and things should be then focused on their value system and how that value system has come to be, and that may create some enlightenment. And again, it's all a part of allowing the individual who is steadfast in their way to have a self-discovery, an aha moment that gives them permission to make a change, allows them to be safe and vulnerable in a way in which they understand, oh, okay. Now, here's the thing I can also tell you is that you can also appeal to the economic factor of
Mm.
leaders. And sometimes you can say to them, look, let's just take a look at the hard numbers. So even if you don't feel that your organization should change, maybe you think that all the things you're doing are great, even though people think they're toxic. Let's just take a look at what you said before, the turnover. What are you spending in the way of turnover? What do you see in the dollars? And what you can speak about is even opportunity cost. Opportunity cost to an individual is when they lose a person in an organization. If you've had at least 3 years in an organization and you leave, you cost the company 25% of your salary because you take organizational intelligence with you. Now, it's not stuff that you're stacking in a briefcase or sitting in a file to you somewhere else. It's what you know about the company that allows you to operate. You know the personalities of the people, you understand the rules and regulations. When people call and ask you information, you know who to go to immediately. You don't spend a lot of time. There's money to that. So it's 25% of the salary. Then another 15% of the salary on top of that is then what it costs you to woo that particular person to the organization. And then the money that you're spending on training them to actually complete the job or do the job. Now, although people will come with skill sets, they don't know the intricacies of your jobs. They don't know your company's rules and regulations, policies and procedures. Somebody has to teach them. And even if they have to learn it themselves, there's still a cost involved in that. So you're talking about up to 40% of the individual salary is spent just replacing a person. And when the person has been there for longer than 3 years, they've been there 5 years or 7 or 10 years and leave the organization, it costs you even more because they are taking even more intellectual intelligence with them when they leave the organization.
Well, it's really, I never had it laid out that way before. That's really fascinating. I hope hearing some of this can help any listeners out there who might be in the midst of something in their workplace. I think that's really, really helpful, and there's a lot there to think about. It might be nice now to ask you then about your most recent publication, if that's okay, because I think that's something very close to your heart, I understand.
It is.
But it's also why you're even interested in these areas as well. So I'd love to hear about Fanny Rules, if that's okay.
Well, absolutely, it would be okay. It's my pleasure to introduce you. So, just for the video, I'm holding it up. Fanny Rules. It's a mother's leadership lessons that never grow old, and these are the life teachable moments that my mother passed along to me as a young boy and as a young man. And it's a way for me to honor my mother. So, at 12 years old, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And we did not think she would make it. I'm from a very, very poor town in West Virginia, and we were very poor. We sometimes I say we didn't have two nickels to rub together to actually make things work. But mom was very clear about some things, and one of the things that she taught me was that my character is going to be defined by the choices I make, not the circumstances I find myself in. She said, there'll be circumstances all the time, but how you choose to act about them will make a difference. She told me that successes and failures don't shape my life. It's how I handle them. And so if I really take those, I took those life lessons to heart. And as a 12-year-old boy, I helped nurture her on her bedside. We thought she would die because 50 some years ago, when people were diagnosed with cancer, ultimately more of them died than people survived. And so this was an opportunity where my mom chose life. She said, I'm not going to be defined by my cancer. Cancer is a circumstance. I'm going to live life. And I'm going to try to teach my son as much as I possibly can. So in those years, and of course, there were some times before, I mean, mom was always mentoring me. So I kind of thought of I think of my mom now as really my greatest mentor. And she spent so much time with me because mom was the nurturer and the caregiver. Dad was the protector and provider. And by the way, we all got along very well, but the book is about mom. Although I've included a little bit of dad because my brother said to me, he said, if you're going to write a book about mom, he said, don't forget dad. And I said, it's okay. Dad will play a role just like he did in our family. Mom was a star. So mom's a star of the book. Mom was a star of the family. So that would be the case. Well, the great news is, and I don't mind sharing this because it's all part of it, but she lived 43 years from that time before she passed away. but what she passed away from was not natural causes. She died as a result of dementia and Alzheimer's.
Mm.
So my mom could outrun cancer, but she could not outrun Alzheimer's and dementia. So my proceeds of the book are going to benefit the Alzheimer's Association so that we can do something good. Alzheimer's stole my mom's memories, and this book is a chance for me to give them back. So it's 31 teachable moments wrapped around 9 rules. And it becomes a great guide for leaders to really take and absorb this. So purpose-driven leaders would like this book. Emerging leaders would like this book because these lessons really will make sense to you when you start to see them. And they're built in bite-sized pieces, easy to read, easy to absorb and understand. And you get an opportunity to understand a little bit about Fanny. And I think it's also important for our listeners to say this, like, it's not lost on me that Fanny means something else in other cultures. So my mom's nickname was Fanny, and how she got that nickname was her girlfriends. And so I tell this story in the book, but there's so much other stuff in the book that I don't mind sharing this just to tease the listeners a little bit in case they'd like to get it. And by the way, it is available on Amazon Yukon, so they're in the United Kingdom, so you'd be able to get it. And so she got her nickname because she was 98 pounds soaking wet. And her girlfriends were all about her being more flirtatious. They said, and her name was Frances. And they said, Frances, you need to be more flirtatious. Mom was shy and reserved. I mean, when she spoke, she said great things, but she was shy and reserved, and she was saving herself for this beanpole of a man named Slim, who was my dad. So they were Fanny and Slim. 65 years married, they were Fanny and Slim. Most people didn't even know their real names. So the girlfriend said to her, they said, you know, honey, the only way you are ever going to have one is if we give you that name. So the name Fanny was born, and Mom wore that moniker proudly for this 65, 70 years that she had that name. And so, you know, we really refer to her as my mom. So my mom, Fanny, and that's, you know, that'll give you an idea about the book and what's behind it.
Sounds wonderful. So it sounds like a really good personal way of actually passing on some really important knowledge, and some knowledge that's really prescient in the world today, because there's so much talk about thought leadership. And you know, all of us who are in any way entrepreneurial, we have to be our own marketers and everything. Because I mean, I can say I'm a podcaster, but I'm also a marketer. You know, I do all the marketing for the podcast myself and everything, and I'm having to learn all of that and how to influence and be you know, yeah, just there's so much language you have to learn, and so much to do with algorithms and everything, and how to hit the sweet spots of stuff, which I'm still very much a
Right.
novice at. But yeah, so all of that, it just feels very transferable to a range of different approaches to what we think of as leadership.
Yes, it is really, it's the leader. So I have so a couple of messages that when I work not only in my consulting world, but also as an executive coach. And so I have a few messages that I sort of begin with. So one of them that I would share with you is this, is that you cannot serve the many until you serve the one. And what that means is that you, the leader, have to be right before you can figure out how to help someone else. And if you yourself are not in the right spot, just like we talked before about those toxic leaders, when those toxic leaders are not right, how are they helping the other people who are
Mhm.
part of the organization? All they're doing is making the other individuals frustrated over the fact that they can't actually, you know, move forward with their lives, and they feel like that leader needs to get right. So in the book, Cohesion Culture, Proven Principles to Retain Your Top Talent, the first 2 chapters of the book is on leadership. It's
Mhm.
actually helping you make sure that you really know. And the Fanny Rules is a companion to that because it expands on more of the leadership aspects of you, because you really need to get the leadership right. Leadership is what drives the culture. You have HR strategies and practices that begin holding it up and begin supporting it, but it's the leadership that actually makes a difference in the culture, not the HR. And HR people aren't running around and actually making sure that the culture is okay in every department and with every business unit and every individual. It's the leaders who actually have that responsibility to do it. And that's the heart of the people that I work with, is to make sure that that gets handled, and that people are able to respond in that way. So So from that, not only is it getting the leader right, but also that message, you cannot serve the many until you serve the one, reminds us that we aren't always leading a group of them. We are often leading a group of him and her. And so therefore we have to be responsive to those individuals, to their styles, to their types, to how they respond to the world. And the transformative leader is the ultimate leader for a cohesion culture, because that particular individual says, I will think of someone else first and then self. Not that they don't think about self. This isn't martyrism. This is not where the individual completely forgets about, but they think about someone else first and then self, and they do that. So that gives us an opportunity to look at it. The other way is to say, you cannot serve the many until you serve the one, which says that I must see the humanness of the one if I'm going to change the plight of many. So if you want to be involved in social, so in your arts and culture listeners who maybe are with nonprofits, who actually are thinking about solving things like issues with agriculture or housing, transportation, hunger, self development, whatever it is that they're doing, they must first see the humanness of the one. Then they can be involved in understanding the many, and it really enhances and changes it. And that became very clear to me when I was in Kenya. So I had a couple of opportunities to be in Kenya on some field work. During one of them, I was in a village and I met with three men. These three men had been involved in this village, but they had a mentor who actually paid for them to be educated. And they could have left the village and gone somewhere else, but they chose to come back. Now, this village was in poor economic conditions, as you can expect in most of the areas in rural Africa. It had a lot of crime. There was very poor, again, economic conditions, poor housing, poor water, all of this. There was drugs. And they really looked at it and said that the real issue in this area, that something that they could say was the root cause, was prostitution. And so they then looked at it and said, we must figure out the difference between the person who says, I choose to do this because I have no choice, and the person who chooses to do it, who says, that's the way I want it to be. So they went with the individual who felt like they didn't have a choice. And they said they taught them a skill or a trade. And I was very interested in that. And I said, well, tell me, what are you going to do? And they said, well, we're going to teach them to sew. This way they'll be able to create something, take it to the marketplace, and be able to sell something other than themselves. So they'll be able to have worth for themselves because now they will make money from something that they have put together. And that would be a great thing. And all of a sudden, my US mind is going crazy. And I'm thinking like, wow, how many sewing machines? How big is the space where you're going to be? Have you passed out pamphlets? Do you have people coming in to do it? Now, that's all going inside my crazy head. Thankfully, I knew that I should not speak that. And I simply asked the question and said, so how many sewing machines do you have? And he said, one. He said, because I must teach the one who will then help me teach the many. And that all of a sudden became so crystal clear to me, because the one taught two. The two to each is four. The four is 8 and 16, 32, and moving on. And we know how that can actually create the groundswell that we need to create change. And what we do know is this, just like in this village, when those women, when their safety, security, and protection were challenged, they could never self-actualize to being a more fulfilled human being, because their safety and security and protection. And that's what happens, we retreat in. So in an organization that has a toxic environment, that's what happens. That's why you don't have great performance in a toxic environment, because people are so concerned for their safety and protection, they can't self-actualize and do jobs and think of themselves as bigger and better and greater and thinking of helping someone else, because they're so focused. We force the individual to focus on themselves, to become myopic and to move inside. But when you give people life, when you give people hope, you break the cycle of helplessness. And that's what those men did. They broke the cycle of helplessness by providing hope.
It's a great story. You must have loads of examples of that from your travels, your research all over the place? Because I know you travel widely to deliver talks and to consult and all sorts of things, and you deliver courses and everything. So, I
Yes.
mean, do you have any other of those kinds of stories? Have you seen anything else that you've witnessed that has informed a lot of your books? And
I'm a metaphorical teacher or a metaphorical speaker, so I like to give, real live examples of things. And so,
yeah.
so this one, a little lighter on the lighter side. So I was in the Philippines, and I actually visited with Raquel Choa, who is known as the Queen of Chocolate. So although you have the Queen of England, Philippines has the Queen of Chocolate. And so Raquel goes, her history goes back to many, many generations, taught them how to use the cacao tree. And that's where the great chocolate comes from. The very rich chocolate comes from the cacao tree. So we were there, and we were learning about this cacao tree and this chocolate and all this. One of the things that I thought was really surprising to me was they allow the beginning stalk of the cacao tree to grow maybe 9 months, 11 months. And it has these beautiful green leaves that just start at the top of them, nice big full leaves. And they cut the stem off right before there. I'm thinking to myself, wow, wonder why they did that. Why did they cut the tree there to do that? Well, what they then do is they slit the top, and then they take a piece of a mature cacao tree and they graft it inside of that and then wrap it all up in plastic to make sure that the cacao tree doesn't get any diseases or anything with it. And then they allow it to continue to bond. And when it does, it changes how the cacao tree grows. So if I were to ask you, do you know how long it takes a cacao tree to actually produce fruit when it just grows from the ground fresh up?
I don't. I would guess 5
Okay.
years. I don't know.
5 years. That's a great guess. Exactly. 5 years. Great
Oh,
guess.
really?
And we didn't plan this, so this is awesome. And then now, when you graft a piece of it, how long do you think it takes the cacao tree to actually produce fruit?
Ah, oh, I don't know. Maybe it halves the time. I don't know.
That's it. Brilliant. You are 100% brilliant. See, your listeners know how brilliant you are. I now have heard. It's right. It reduces it in half. So that's the value of mentoring. So what I've learned about mentoring is that's when you're taking the young cacao tree and you're grafting it with them with someone who is seasoned,
Mm,
and actually, allow them to really move further and faster along in their career. We know this, that 63% of all employees in an organization are looking for growth, development, and advancement. So
mm,
be the mentor, be the cacao tree that is actually grafted to the young cacao tree and make a difference in producing that chocolate in half the
mm,
time that it would have taken them to do it regularly.
mhm.
And so those are a couple of the stories that I would give you that kind of give you some examples of different life lessons. I think the most important thing I would also say in this is that if you listen to what I'm telling you and you think of it as wisdom, then it's because you feel that the knowledge has been applied. So when people have said that knowledge is power, they have forgotten the rest of the sentence.
Mm,
Knowledge is not power by itself. Knowledge is just an accumulation of information. You can hoard information, you can hoard books, you can collect things, you can know all kinds of information, but if you never put that information to use, it's never wisdom. So therefore, you never have the power. The power is using the knowledge and information you have. So when your listeners are listening to the stories that I'm telling today, and they're actually thinking about them, when they execute those stories, they then will be able to see and fulfill the wisdom of what we're actually talking to you about today. And the same thing will hold true to all of your guests who will come after me and to those guests who came before, that when you go back and re-listen to the recordings and you hear information, put that information to use. Don't let it just sit there and wait on itself to develop, but actually do something with it.
that's yeah, really fantastic advice and a really great analogy as well. I mean, what strikes me from that is that I think certainly in the arts, and I'm thinking about film. That my background is film, cinema, and with freelancers of all kinds, I think it feels like we're pitted against each other. We have to compete for everything. And that idea of mentorship, I think, is so important to just remove that element of feeling or perceiving a threat from someone and moving
Yes.
towards helping each other out. I think
Yeah.
is a really big cultural shift in probably a wide range of different types of workplace, different types of, you know, just anything, any kind
It,
of
it,
system. Yeah, I think
it,
it's
it's
something.
like open source. When you think about open source technology,
Yeah.
open source technology is that everybody shares in it. So you don't really own it. You contribute to it. You extend it. So if all of a sudden we could take that mindset and go, wow, I wonder what that would apply like, instead of being so threatened by the fact that somebody might get some, a leg up on you or do something a little better than you did. You kind of, I think for me, it would mean, well, I still have to stay sharp. So I don't mind sharing my information because I know I'm going to remain sharp, or I'm going to work to remain sharp in what I do. So a couple of things that I wanted to also tell you about
Yeah,
cohesion
sure.
culture. Okay, good. One of them is that cohesion is what's called a causal phenomenon.
Hmm.
It's not correlational. So when I say that, meaning that a correlation typically is taking two items and finding a statistical relationship between them. Either they statistically relate or they don't. Oftentimes we look at correlational data and we like to predict that, oh, these two things happen. This is good for us. This means we can do business and build business on that. It's not necessarily true. What you want to look for is what we call causal phenomena. And causal phenomena means cause and effect. So here's what we know in research. Every time cohesion is present, you get performance. The level of performance you get is a level of engagement of where individuals are contributors, individuals are enthusiastic, they're loyal, they help other people, they think beyond themselves. That's the level of engagement you get. And so with cohesion, you get performance, you get engagement. With
Mm,
correlational data, you just get relationships. So I'm going to give you an example to share that with you.
sure.
So you have a rainy day in the United Kingdom.
We have,
Do you?
yes.
Yes.
We
So
do
do you?
today.
So do you open your bumper chute? Do you open your umbrella?
Stay inside mostly.
You stay inside, right? So, right. And
Yeah, yeah.
so the opportunity is that you can have a rainy day and not open an umbrella. You can have an open umbrella and not have a rainy day.
Mm-hmm.
Sometime, if you do get a chance to go to your coast and go to your beach line, you might sit under an umbrella to shade you from the sun. And if you do, the umbrella is open and there is no rainy day. That's
Mm-hmm.
correlational. So I
Mm.
can correlate the fact that rainy days and umbrellas have a correlation to each other, but one does not cause the other. You don't open an umbrella and you get rain. You don't have rain and automatically open an umbrella. But when you have cohesion, you do. Anytime you have cohesion, you have performance. If you have performance, you are more likely it's attributed to cohesion. If you can't really have the level of performance that we want in an organization without first really developing time and energy on cohesion. The other thing that also happens when I work with folks is they hear me talk about it, and I'm very passionate about cohesion culture, and they think, well, especially your folks from the United Kingdom, they're saying, oh, well, he just wants to Americanize us. He just wants to make us an American culture. And I'm like, no, 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 that's not it. I take the strategic framework of belonging, value, and shared mutual commitments and lay it over top of your organization for you to then say, I now can organize the chaos within my company because I now know the structure, right? So I'm not making it the same. It's how your culture is, but in those areas. So one of the analogies or metaphors I use is about chocolate cake. So do you like chocolate cake?
Yes.
Good. Have you had at least one piece of chocolate cake in your life?
Yes.
Have you had more than one piece of chocolate cake?
Most definitely, yes.
Okay, and I promise you and your listeners, I will not ask if you've had two pieces at the same time. So the fact that you've had two pieces of chocolate cake, the likelihood is you've had it at different times and from different bakers. Would that be true?
Yes.
Good. Now, did they taste exactly the same?
No, not
No, but
always.
but they tasted enough that you could recognize that they were chocolate cake.
Yes.
Good. There are three primary ingredients to a chocolate cake in addition to the cocoa: the milk, the eggs, and the wheat, the flour. So in looking at those items, you can have a variety of milk sources, a variety of egg sources and wheat sources that actually create the flour. So you've got all this going in. So it depends on how those are put together that actually create the chocolate cake you're going to eat. And when you taste it, or when you see it, you recognize that it's chocolate cake. You don't have any problem recognizing it's chocolate cake, but you don't look at it and go, wow, that chocolate cake looks exactly like the other person's chocolate cake, so I'm not going to have it. So a cohesion culture is exactly that. It's your chocolate cake. So I like to say that when you make your cohesion culture, you make your chocolate cake means you get to have your cake and your cohesion too.
Very nice analogies. Really good. I can see you've really, really thought these out, and the metaphors really do help bring the ideas to life. So I really hope that helps a lot of our listeners. Um, I'm wary of keeping you too long. So is there anything else that you really wanted to say today that we haven't got to yet?
Nothing that we haven't gotten to, but I would just really, like to thank you again for giving me a chance to talk about my mom and to
Mm,
really promote the Fanny Rules book. It's so important to those of us who have been caregivers with people who've suffered with Alzheimer's and dementia to understand that it's not an easy, road to be on. And when we have to find ways, we all have to find our own ways to give those memories back. We know that our loved ones are not going to remember them, no matter how much we want them to. They'll have moments when they'll remember them, but they won't be the same.
mm.
And those memories, when they're stolen from you, find a way to give them back. And this was just my way of giving those memories back to my children, my grandchildren, my brother and his family, a way for them to kind of remember, grandma in a way in which they wouldn't have remembered her normally.
Yes. And also then the rest of us can benefit from her wisdom and we can apply it.
Yes, and
Yeah.
so now when you see and hear Fanny Rules, you'll know that I'm talking about my mom.
Yeah. And I also, it makes me want to do a fist punch as well. Fanny Rules, like that. It
Yes,
feels natural to
exactly.
do that.
Well, women power, if you think about it, I mean, there's such a great, strong, conversation about that is that
Mm,
the fact that here we have an individual with a 12th grade US education, which means no college, no formal education beyond that, who is wise beyond her years. I mean, things that she would tell me, like one of those conversations that she would tell me is about being mediocre. She says, "Don't be
mm.
mediocre. Don't be lukewarm." She says, "You want to be hot, you want to be cold." She said, because mediocre is just blah and it just settles, for whatever. And so I took that message and I then crafted it into this one. And it's that mediocre settles to the bottom, then complains about the view. And I never wanted to be a person who complained about the view. I wanted to celebrate the view. And so she would also tell me that I could be anything I wanted to be. So if you want to understand how I could actually move from this poor town in West Virginia and actually receive, two postgraduate degrees, end up with a PhD, all of this is because the fact that this woman said, I can be whatever I wanted to be, but whatever I wanted to be the best of it that I can. And she didn't put any parameters on it. She said, if you want to be a janitor and you want to sweep floors, she said, then be the best floor sweeper there is. And Fanny told me that I needed to clean in the corners because she said a good floor sweeper will clean in the corners because anybody can sweep in the middle.
That's brilliant. That's just such a lovely, again, a lovely picture to leave us with. That's a really important message, I think. Um, so, Dr. Troy Hall, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. It's been really informative, really enjoyable. So, do you want to just tell us very quickly where listeners can find more information about you and all of your amazing work?
Well, great, thank you. So on LinkedIn, you can connect with me at Dr. Troy Hall. That's Dr. Troy Hall, Troyhall. So it's a real simple name, it's 10 letters, right? And then if you want to check with me on the website, it's those same 10 letters, drtroyhall.com. And if you want to know more about the books that I put out, then it's drtroyhall.com/books.
Awesome. That's really great. And I'll put those links in our show notes everywhere that this episode is going to be going out as well. So it's easy for people.
Splendid.
Well, thank you so much. It's been really enjoyable. I hope you've enjoyed your time as well.
I have,
Good.
and as I think, as I might say customarily, cheers.
Cheers. It's been splendid.
Splendid.
This is a Cozy Pea Pod production with me, Paula Blair. The music is Common Ground by Airtone, used under a 3.0 non-commercial Creative Commons license and is available at ccmixter.org. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a good rating, subscribe and recommend Audiovisual Cultures to a friend. All of our contact details, socials, information, ways to listen and our mailing list sign up can be found on our website, linked in the show notes. Thank you so much for listening and supporting. Take care and I'll catch you next time.